the slot corner. It's not a new position in the NFL. In fact, nickel packages have been around for a very long time. They just historically have been used on third and longs or other surefire passing downs. And the slot corner position itself has historically been occupied by a smaller backup DB rather than a guy who's considered a starter. Nickel formation itself has historically been, at best, a changeup that defenses can go to when they want to get quicker and faster on the back end, and at worst, seldom used at all. However, in the 2010s, a new era of offensive football started to emerge. Teams started throwing the ball a lot more. The passing game exploded across the league. And this is in large part due to the late 2000s Patriots, who got into the shotgun a whole bunch and started throwing the ball all over the yard. But for whatever reason, teams made a concerted effort to get more receivers on the field, and as a reaction, defenses started using nickel more. And nickel is, of course, having 5 defensive backs on the field. And because of this, the slot corner position went from a bit of an afterthought to a legitimate weapon and a vital part of any defense. Now, as the league continues to change, so do the demands and the importance of this once specialized position, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As I've mentioned, the slot corner position became a lot more important in the mid-2010s with the rise in usage of nickel personnel. And of course, the rise in usage of nickel personnel coincides almost perfectly with the rise of 11 personnel. And 11 personnel is, of course, the use of 1 running back and 1 tight end. 1 and 1, 11. Teams found it more advantageous to be light and fast on the offensive side of the ball and try to generate explosives through the air, and so defenses had to adjust, and that's why, since the early to mid-2010s, the use of 5 DBs became the new norm and started way outpacing the use of 4 DBs, which is, of course, base personnel. So now that we understand the rise in usage of the slot corner position in the mid-2010s, I think it's important to ask, who did defensive coaches elect to put out there in the slot? And to understand that, we first need to know who offenses were putting in the slot at receiver. And they were using smaller, shiftier guys who weren't really big and physical and couldn't really handle press, but they were quick and could get in and out of their breaks very well. Slot corners had to defend that, and so defensive coaches elected to put smaller, shiftier corners who they didn't necessarily trust to hold up on the outside in the slot. And while they weren't on the outside pressing 6'5" Calvin Johnson or anything like that, they did have to handle two-way goes out of the slot, which is the idea that a slot receiver is not limited by the sideline the same way an outside receiver is, and therefore he's much more likely to break in or out on any given play. The odds are a lot closer rather than an outside receiver who's much more likely to break in, if that makes sense. And so to handle this, with whatever slot corners lacked in size and sometimes speed, they had to be able to make up for with quickness and agility. But in a point that I will keep coming back to, the NFL is constantly changing, and therefore the demands of every position are constantly changing with it. And one of these changes has to do with the run game. While the pass game still reigns supreme in the NFL, the run game has made a bit of a comeback in recent years as defenses have elected to use lighter boxes, smaller bodies on the back end, and the massive increase in too high coverages. No better example of this new run game coming back phenomenon exists than the Philadelphia Eagles, who built a buzzsaw last season and ran the ball nearly 66% of the time on their way to a Super Bowl victory. Teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens are also great examples of teams who have really leaned into the run game more as the NFL has geared up to stop the explosive passes. The latter two especially are examples of teams who have leaned into a lot of 12 personnel, or the use of 1 running back and 2 tight ends, to overmatch the nickel personnel that defenses put on the field so much these days. But even teams who don't run a lot of 12 personnel have found different types of slot receivers who are willing to do the dirty work. They're willing to make physical plays over the middle of the field. They're willing to block while still doing all the things that a slot receiver would do, kind of like the Rams over the past 5 years with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And so you see an uptick in the use of 12 personnel over the last couple of seasons, but not a massive one like you'd expect for teams that are running the ball way more. So all this to say, defenses have had to get heavier while still limiting explosive plays because explosive plays are the main driver of offensive success. And so defenses have had to come to a similar compromise that offenses have. They've had to find their versatile chess piece at slot corner to match the offense's versatile chess piece at F tight end or slot receiver. And that's why you'll see a slight uptick in the use of base defense over the last few years, but that's not the real solution. The real solution has been bigger slot corners. Now, to demonstrate this, I want to talk about the use of safeties as slot corners. In recent years, despite defenses still running primarily out of nickel, slot corners have gotten a lot bigger. And this is because when defenses go nickel now, a lot of them are choosing to use 3 safety sets where they put that third safety in the slot instead of the smaller slot corner that we used to see. Now, without getting into the minutia of this data, the chart here aims to show you how many regular slot corner snaps are occupied by guys whose primary position is safety. You'll notice that jump comes right around the time that Mike Macdonald entered the league and the ensuing years as his proteges got jobs as well. When Macdonald got to Baltimore, he elected to use 6'4" safety Kyle Hamilton as his primary slot defender, and that absolutely transformed Baltimore's defense by putting one of their best, most versatile players at what is now a vital position of the defense. Now the head coach of Seattle, Macdonald has a super physical slot corner named Devin Witherspoon, but they did draft an uber athletic safety in Nick Emmanwori that could potentially get some snaps in the slot when he gets healthy and bump Witherspoon to the outside. What about those proteges that I previously mentioned? Well, Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter has elected to use Derwin James as his primary slot corner, while the new Ravens defensive coordinator Zach Orr rotates Hamilton in with Marlon Humphrey in the slot, but I do wonder how much different that snap count would look if Ardarius Washington was healthy and Kyle Hamilton didn't have to play so much safety. It's not just the Macdonald tree though. The Rams' primary slot corner is a safety in Quentin Lake. The Packers have drafted a safety in Javon Bullard to play in the slot, and even the corners by trade that are now playing in the slot are usually bigger physical playmakers like Cooper DeJean and now late career Jalen Ramsey. There are countless examples of how the slot corner position is changing, but the point is all the same. The position has new demands. Being able to match up effectively with those F tight end or dirty work receiver types, being able to be a part of the run fit while still being able to carry routes vertical from the slot. Now, all of this doesn't mean that the small slot is gone completely. In fact, many teams still use the smaller slot corner, and against teams who throw the ball a lot and are in surefire passing situations and use a lot of 11 personnel and are sticking someone like Calvin Austin in the slot, yeah, there's still place for the Roger McCreary's of the world. It's just that teams find it beneficial to have multiple options out of the slot. For example, the Chargers, they still use Derwin James as their main big slot corner, but they have the option to slot Tarheeb Still inside and use him as their smaller, more agile nickelback, not the band. But anyways, it's just all matchup based, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. And the current NFL demands the bigger slot type more than it ever has. The NFL is a constant cycle of metas. Run, pass, big, small, fast, physical, short passes, long passes. The best thing to do in any given moment is a reaction to what the other side of the ball is doing, and that is constantly changing. You only get 53 roster spots and a salary cap. There will be parts of your roster that are lacking in one way or another, and teams find it very important to not let that weakness get exposed, and that's why you have to constantly react to what the other side of the ball is doing. The league will swing from one end of an extreme to another, and through these swings, smaller evolutions occur. Positional importance and responsibilities will evolve as teams look for new ways to win on the margins, and no position in the NFL quite symbolizes this evolution like the slot corner position. And I will leave you with that. Till next time.